welcome everyone. Today's session is called Budget What? Why everyone should understand budgeting. My name is Callie Juarez. I am the Director of Academic Budget Management here at California State University, Northridge. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Academic Resources Steering Committee for inviting me to speak to you today about my favorite subject, budget. So first, who am I? What makes me a quote unquote expert on budget? Well, I'm not sure that I'm an expert, but I love what I do. And I've been working here in the CSU for 19 years with the majority in the area of academic budgeting. So a little bit about me, my education. I have a Bachelor's of Arts degree, Psychology, Sonoma State, Master's in Public Education from Northridge, and an EDD in higher education from Northridge as well. But I think it's a little bit more important to explain my work experience. So my work experience is all in the CSU. I started out as a student assistant at Sonoma State University. I then moved on to California State University Channel Islands, where I started as a department coordinator and worked my way up to manager of academic resources and instructional support. Then I found myself at Cal State Northridge, just a little bit down the road. And I started as the manager of academic resources, first in the College of Education and then Health and Human Development. And now I am the director of academic budget management in academic affairs. One of my favorite pictures ever is all of my mascots together in front of the state capitol. So when putting this presentation together, I really wanted it to be fun and exciting. However, let's be honest, budget is not always fun and exciting. And unfortunately, budgets can sometimes be more than a mystery and a not so fun game of finding the right path to the right dollars. So this presentation are for those that are learning about budget, maybe for the first, second, and possibly third time. So I hope that I meet your expectations today and that we can go ahead and get started. So what are we going to learn today? So first, what is a budget? We will define budget in a higher education environment. What are the different types of budget? Budget models in higher education. This is an important thing to learn, and we'll be really putting a lot of focus on the budget models. Then strategic planning and budgeting. How do they work together? The budget cycle, what should it look like? How to find budget information related to the CSU, and we'll also be using CSUN as an example. And then we'll be talking about what your takeaways from this presentation should be. So first up, what is a budget? We have to define it. So first of all, let's look at things that you're probably either used to seeing or not seeing or just overwhelmed by. You know, we have all these images, pie charts, lots of spreadsheets, more spreadsheets, some images that don't make sense, a flow chart that I'm not even sure I could understand. All these images can sometimes give you lots of anxiety. It can all be very confusing about what this might be versus another thing. So today, the goal is to help you understand why everyone at the university should have a basic understanding of how budgets are developed. So what is a budget? Let's take our basic definitions. So Webster, our good source, states a statement of a financial position of an administration for a defined period of time based on estimates or expenditures during that period. a plan for coordinating of resources and expenditures. Google says an estimate of income and expenditures for a set period of time. And the Business Dictionary says an estimated of cost, revenue, and resources over a specific period, reflecting a reading of future financial conditions and goals. So all of these kind of come down to one thing. What are the commonalities? So what really is a budget? In the end, in the most simplest terms, the most important concept of budgeting is it's a plan. A budget is a financial plan for a specific period of time. And if you remember one thing from this presentation, it's this. Remember that budgeting is a plan. So what is the purpose of a budget? A forecast of planned revenues, spending, and saving. It's also a tool for allocation of current and anticipated financial resources. We can also see it as a method of communication, and we're going to dive into this a little bit more later. A reflection of organizational values. I was recently at a conference and someone said a budget is a moral document. So really stop and think about that. What does that mean? What does the CSU budget say about its values? What does your campus budget say about its values? It's an interesting concept to think of a budget as a moral document. So a little bit of technical stuff here. What is the difference between accounting, budgeting, and finance? This is my absolute favorite kind of picture about what that is. We have finance up at the top. And then we have budgeting here as the future and accounting as the past. So our focus is going to be budgeting, the future. So we're going to start with budget types. And this is just to give you a little bit of overview. We're not going deep into this, but an overview of what budgets your campus has and what budgets the CSU has. So first, operating fund. This is usually, especially at the CSU, the largest fund. It supports the primary mission of the university. This is where revenue from tuition and state appropriations. And we normally call it the general fund. So here at CSUN, we say 48501 or 48530, depending on which general fund we're talking about. So many times it's referred to as with its fund number. So next we're going to look at, so operating funds are usually base or permanent. So many people use that term interchangeably. So base funds are funds that are provided to a department, college, division every single year. They're really seen as recurring funds. So just a little bit of humor here. So recurring is like Taco Tuesday on every Tuesday. So it happens every time and not reoccurring. So base operating funds for the CSU. So let's take a look at it. The following table summarizes the preliminary 2001-2022 base, see, we see that word, base operating fund. This is exactly what it is, including general fund and tuition and fee revenue. So this is what the base fund looks like, the preliminary for the CSU. We see here the final budget from the general fund. The general fund is from the state appropriations. So that's $4 billion. Then the primary gross tuition, which is $3 billion. For the total preliminary operating fund, and we'll talk about that a little bit because we don't get our final budget till July 1, is $7 billion for the entire CSU. So now let's look at what we call one-time funds or project-specific funds. These are funds that are received for a specific project. They're only received once, not recurring like the base permanent funds. Usually there's reporting required on how these funds are spent. And once the funds are spent, that's it. So you receive your money and then poof, it's gone. Some common one-time funds in the CSU are grants, gifts, so not endowment, just one-time gifts, and a big one we've been talking about lately, which is HERF, the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. So these are the funds that the campuses are receiving for COVID-related expenses. Once the funding has been spent, that's it. So let's talk about budget models in higher education. There are multiple models. Today, we're going to review 4 of them, really ones that are either extremely popular in higher education or those that really are used here in the CSU. So first, incremental budgeting. This is what CSUN uses, and I'm going to make an assumption that quite a few other CSUs use as well. So funds are added to or subtracted from the previous year's budget. The base budgets are not revisited. It's assumed they're correct. And really, most importantly, it assumes goals and objectives of the institution do not change. So an incremental budget is usually not linked to plans and priorities. So this is a statement taken from the 2020-21 budget from the CSU, a pro rata reduction based on 1920 campus operation budgets. In other words, an across the board methodology. So really focusing on that across the board methodology. So there was a reduction taken, as all of us know, from 2021 budget. And the CSU used an across the board methodology, which is common in incremental budgeting. So let's look at incremental budgeting. So we have 3 colleges here. We have 2019-20, and then the new faculty in this area, they receive money when new faculty come on. There was a 2% increase, and that's now their new budget. So really, we're not taking into account 1920. We're not looking at the past. We're not questioning the past. We're making an assumption that history is correctly allocated. And really in incremental budgeting, we focus on what is the new dollars, or as we had to in 2021, what is the reduction? So a popular budgeting model that people talk about is zero-based budgeting. However, in reality, it does not work for higher education. So I think we do wonder why everyone keeps talking about it. And it's really because the theory behind zero-based budgeting is intriguing, but it is extremely time-consuming. It is what we would consider the most centralized model. Each area must justify all their expenses from zero. So every year you start at zero. It really hampers long-term planning, and in the end can result in full-scale hearings on reviewing of areas and programs. And I think that's really why people gravitate towards zero-based budgeting, is that reviewing of areas and programs. It gives the opportunity outside of program review for departments and instructional areas. It gives that opportunity to really understand an area and review it. But on the flip side, doing this every year is extremely time consuming and really not necessary. I have been in an institution that they really wanted to do zero-based every few years with a few areas. And that really looked to me more like a review of the area's budget, yet it was being called zero-based. So here's an example of a zero-based budgeting request. So this is an advising center. And these are the normal expenses of it. So we have the director at 100,000, and you really have to justify every expense. So you're saying, what's the justification of the director? Well, to provide direction to staff. What's the justification of an administrative staff? To support the center. All the SSPs, which are the student service professional. So these are the advisors. So what's the justification here? I'll be honest, I made this up, but this is, well, we need all these advisors to maintain a 1 to 500 student to advisor ratio. And then really getting down to some incremental costs that you wouldn't even think you would need to justify, like voicemail, equipment, printing. So this just becomes a very detailed exercise for the head of a department when it might not be all that necessary, when you know these are the expenses, the staff are permanent. So really, why would you go through this process? So next is formula-based. So this is allocating budget according to a selected matrix. Now, what's really important about formula-based budgeting is coming up with a formula that is fair, objective, and make sure that it inputs the correct metrics. So some examples of input metrics would be full-time equivalent student, student credit hours, student faculty ratio, full-time equivalent faculty, lots of examples. This budgeting model is usually not suitable for central administration units because we, because I'm a central, do not have quantifiable activities. So just as a reminder, there are lots of different budgets across your campus. Depending on how your campus is using GI 2025 dollars, there might be a budget that is formula-based specific to a performance measures. So the advantage to formula is it brings that objectivity to the budget process. The disadvantage is that these formulas can get increasingly complicated as the years go by, as you try to weight the formulas to deal with a specific issue. So sometimes what you'll see is that a specific budget across the campus is formula-based. So here's an example of an instructional equipment allocation. So we've got inventory, which is really a depreciation value of equipment. We have IT purchases, we have FTS, and then lab and activity courses based on how they're classified in their CS numbers. So all of that comes down when there's a total allocation of 1.1 million. All of these factors are used into allocating those dollars. So one, I think zero-based budgeting is extremely controversial, and I would call responsibility center budgeting also controversial. So an RCM or an RCB, really it's used interchangeably. Revenues are credited to the responsibility center management that generates them. So in this example, and Rutgers currently uses this model. It's a very popular budgeting model across private institutions. So schools, research centers, auxiliaries receive all their revenue. And then, which could be tuition and fees, FA return, other income. And then those areas pay direct and indirect costs. So there's direct expenses, there's system-wide support, and local and regional support units. So let's say you had an RCM and a College of Science was receiving all the tuition. They would be taxed for their for service units. So they would be taxed for student health center, for for our office, academic resources and planning, for the provost office. All of these taxes would happen and they would keep all their revenue. What this does is this encourages the colleges to really seek additional revenue. So really out there and recruiting students, getting research dollars, all of this stuff. It is not an easy budgeting model, especially for areas that are having difficulty recruiting, but really not at their fault. It could be just that's how the world is working. So I think this model, it seems to work for more private institutions, but it would be very difficult to have at a CSU. So what is the model at your campus? So here's a list of most of the models that exist in higher ed. I actually had to fill in formula based there. So for CSUN, it's really a hybrid approach. Our general operating fund is allocated in an incremental budget model from the university to the divisions and from the divisions to the colleges. But we have other areas that are more formula based. So we have our lottery budget, that's a formula. We have our campus quality fee, which is a student excellence fee, which is a formula. So really, I would consider us a hybrid approach. So think about it a little bit. What do you think the models that are used, what models are used at your campus? So just a little bit about budget allocations. Budget allocations are really like a funnel. So allocations start at the top and they come down. It starts with state appropriations, then the California State University system. And just a little reminder, estimated tuition dollars are part of the allocation, but campuses retain their tuition dollars. So the system is incremental, so it provides the dollars to the campuses. The campuses then, really, this is where you start seeing different budget models. So the campus then, in their model, provides dollars to the division. Then once again, the division could have a different model than the campus. And then that provides funding to the colleges. Now, my funnel doesn't even get to the next level, which is usually the bottom level, which is the department areas. So you could be on a campus that had 4 different budget models at different levels. So the campus had a model, then the division had a model, then the college had a model that ended with the departments. And just as a reminder, so the allocations are coming down the funnel. Reporting really goes up the funnel. So anytime we're doing some reporting, and we will look at CSU reporting in a little bit, that is going up. So we're providing reporting all the way to the state system. And really, the state system provides the reporting to the state legislator. So we've gone through all of this. And your question is, why do I need to know this? It's not that interesting. It is to me, of course. If your area needs additional budget, you have to know how it's allocated. So then you'll know how to ask for dollars. So what is the formula behind the allocation? Let's say it's an account code that you're not even using. I mean, these are the questions you have to ask. If you have a desire to advance in your career here in higher education, understanding of budgets really is necessary, because as you continue to move up, you become more responsible for things like budgets, and knowing how it's being allocated, how you're allowed to spend your dollars is extremely important. And budget knowledge is empowering. If you know how to get additional dollars, it is extremely empowering to your area. But then people are like, wait, you know about budgets? Explain them to me. Do a presentation for me. All of these things. So it's extremely empowering in the end. So let's touch on strategic planning and budgeting for a second. My favorite quote: you don't know where you are going. You might, if you don't know where you are going, you might wind up someplace else. Very good, Yogi Berra. Strategic plans are extremely important, and they should prelude to the operating budget. The plan documents the university's aspirations for the future, what it wants to accomplish. So the strategic plan identifies the academic and operational priorities. So what does the budget do and why should it be aligned? The budget assigns resources to the priorities. So ideally, the budget is clearly aligned with the strategic plan. Now, that is in an ideal university budgeting. Unfortunately, in reality, it does not always happen. So it's ideal for colleges and divisions to have plans that strategic plans that roll up to the university, similar to that funnel, but going up. Strategic planning can be a 3-day workshop on its own. So we will not be doing a deep dive here. Just remember, if you don't know what your priorities are, you might be spending your money for the wrong things. So let's get into budget cycle. Depending on the university's budget model, each of these steps will look a little different. So let's start at the beginning. Information gathering. Information gathering for an incremental model is much shorter. It is gathering what the area received the year before, and then modeling it, and then discussing what the model is looking like, and then somebody in our university, it's the cabinet, making the ultimate decision. For zero-based budgeting, this is the information gathering is where a ton of work gets done. This is where the areas are working to present and justify every expense. In the RCM model, modeling would be where most of it is happening, where most of the work is happening, because it will require revenue projections and reviewing all of the projections so that then you could provide budgets to your areas. So learning about where your university is spending its time is important. So what these different stages look like. Where is the discussion happening? Is it happening amongst the higher level? Is it happening in meetings, budget meetings? Is it happening in a Senate committee? And then really questioning who are the final decision makers in your university. This is all about how to understand the budget and how to understand the cycle of budget. So what is going on here? So we're going to look at a budget process, and we're going to dive into it a bit. This is the California state budget process. So not the state university, this is the state. So first is information gathering. So number one, agency prepare budget, the government Department of Finance review, and then do some changes. So this is really that first step of information gathering from all the agencies. Then a very important date, January 10th, is the governor's budget is released, and every agency, including the Cal State, is on pins and needles looking to see what is the budget, what is the governor proposing for a budget. Then we go into modeling. So the modeling happens here at the legislative analyst report. So the legislative analyst is the body that reviews the governor's budget and puts it into numbers. Then the governor reviews that And then we go into the May revise, but I'm going to step back for a second because I think it's important to talk about the subcommittee hearings, the budget bill. So the proposal, the assembly, the budget proposed, the governor proposes the budget. The Assembly and Senate separately introduced budget bills here in step 3. This is the time after those bills are introduced that the CSU leaders will meet with legislators. The union leadership will be doing the same thing. This is considered modeling. We could also say this is the discussion part of the budget because every area, every agency is talking to their legislators and working on how can we make sure we get what's in the governor's budget, or how can we make sure we get more than what's in the governor's budget. So in May, the governor will release the revised amended budget from the January budget. And this is after all that modeling and discussion and all that stuff. And then formal discussions will happen, right? We have full committee hearings. We have the budget conference committee, and then the decision making. We have the assembly floor, that is late June, as well as the Senate floor. 2/3 vote is required for the budget. And then last, the governor actually provides the final budget July 1. And that's when that funnel starts to happen, right? The governor provides the budget, then the system-wide office receives the budget and then sends out what we consider budget memos to the campuses. So let's take a look at the CSU budget. It's a very public one, so it's kind of a good one to think about what we've learned from all these theories. So the CSU submits a budget to the governor, as we saw. We submitted in November, and that's because of the Board of Trustees. It's reviewed, it's approved. So let's look at this document as we've discussed these theories, right? So one, this budget is used as a communication tool, and you can tell these are the first 3 pages. This is a very graphic heavy. If you can find the budget, please, look for it. So let's talk about it as a communication. So what is the CSU trying to represent? What are they trying to say about themselves, ourselves, right? They're saying the CSU tuition and fees are less. That's a huge thing, right? We're trying to say our tuition is less than, let's say, the UC's. So we're not asking for all that much, right? A big one for the legislator, the CSU continues to serve primarily CSU campuses. Now that we've learned the theories behind the budgets, let's dissect a budget. We're going to take a very public budget, which is the CSU, the California State University Systems Request. So every year in November, the chancellor and the Board of Trustees put out a budget. It's almost like a book. It's full of lots of graphics, and it's very colorful. So let's dissect it a little bit. So the CSU submits the budget in November, and this is the first look at what the CSU is requesting. So when we look back a little bit, of course, we're looking at, the numbers, the dollars. But when we talked about what a budget is and the purpose of it, we talked about it as it's a communication tool. So as you can see here, it is communicating. The CSU is communicating to the legislator what it wants them to know about us. So let's look at this. The first thing is CSU tuition and fees are less than comparison institutions. This is huge, right? From a affordability perspective, we want our legislators and our constituents, which really is the state of California, to know we're affordable. But then we also want them to know we're serving primarily California residents. Check this out right here. we've got a significant number of California residents. So not only are we affordable, we're serving our residents. Also, just as important, we're serving a diverse population of students. So we're serving primarily Hispanic students, white, Asian American, non-resident, African American. So here is really what we're trying to portray as a communication tool. We're affordable, we're serving our primary California residents, and we're serving a diverse population. And then I found this one really interesting. The majority of the CSU workforce teaches students. So there's a focus there. There's a focus that, hey, we're not doing, our workforce is in the classroom. It is teaching students. And then you see at the bottom here, hey, this is what we're asking for. Just putting it out there. Here's our proposed budget. We're requesting 556 million. And in these little things, it says what it's for. It's not really the focus of these few pages. The focus of the few pages is really to catch their attention on who we are. And that comes back to, it's about our values. It is a moral document. So I think when I heard a few months ago about a budget being a moral document, I really took it to heart. And I've thought about this a lot. Really, it is. We are laying out here in these first 4 quadrants, what do we value? What is deeply valued in the CSU? Then we move on to one of our important initiatives, and the legislators would also say this is our most important initiative, which is our graduation goals for 2025. So you can see that they're really showing that we're on target. We are making progress as multiple campuses are making progress. So once again here, very specific statistics. 50% of CSU undergrants receive federal Pell Grants. We're servicing students. 95% are from California. We're servicing California students. And then we have 32% of undergraduates are the first in their families to attend college. This is really saying we are servicing our students. We are servicing Californians. We are helping those students, progress in their careers and their education. So 49% of undergraduates are from traditionally underserved minorities, and 94% of new undergraduate transfers are from California communities. Once again, a huge focus that we are serving California residents. So as we see this as a moral document, as we see this as an expression of our values, we see the incremental budgeting request, right? We're not really focusing on this 7.5 billion. That's the past. We have that. We're focusing on, we need this additional 556 million. So I promise you, just hang in there a little bit more. We're almost done. I love this little kitty. So just hang in there. We're getting to it. And I hope you find this information that we're going to show with the CSU website and then CSUN as an example as really important information and how you can be part of the conversation when it comes to budgets. So how do you find budget information? It has been a mystery in previous years, but I think now the CSU and I think many campuses have really made a point to be transparent about their budget as well as their finances. So first we're gonna explore the CSU budget. So here you can see the CSU budget website. And we're gonna look at, so we have the book I showed you earlier was the 2021-22 operating budget book. So this is all of those graphics, but then it is about 30 pages long. So it does get into the details of the needs of the campuses. But if you just scroll down a little bit more, you'll find different things, right? So coded memos are really how the CSU gets its budget. So when you click on this, you'll see that there's already a preliminary 2021-22 budget memo out there. So if you didn't know this exists, you'd be like, wait, where did that come from? So the budget memo says, this is what we think we're getting. Actually, we're pretty confident we're getting this. They wouldn't put out a memo without having some confidence in it. And then if you see here on these attachments, these are gold. You wouldn't even know they were there, but you can click the attachments and it'll tell you by campus what every campus should be expecting. So so here's all the campuses, the bottom line, what they think they're getting, the sources of those dollars, and any other things that campus or the campuses need to know about their tuition. So it has the general fund allocation, which is that state appropriations part. And then it has the estimated tuition and fee revenue. And that gives the total gross operating budget for each of the universities. So we go back to the CSU budget page. You can also look at legislative reports. So what reports have been asked of the CSU? If that interests you, you can click here. Also different things about fees and a whole website dedicated to tuition and fees and how they're set. So here is the set by the CSU trustees. The system-wide tuition is charged at the same rate per academic year at every CSU. So you'll click here and it'll tell an individual what the tuition rates are for all of the different levels. So that's the CSU budget. Really a lot of information you can find directly on the CSU website if you know what you're looking for. The best way I do this is I come up here to the search engine and I put in budget, and this is the first page that comes up. So let's touch on CSU transparency and accountability. So this is a different website, and this is where we're going to look into a little bit of actuals, because this website does not technically have budget. This transparency and accountability website is so important, and it really provides a clear view of every campus's finances. So it is after the year has closed. So this is a little bit different than budget, but I think it's an important website to for all of you to get to know, for all of us to know. So we'll view the CSU's finances and we'll access the financial portal. But first you'll see they have some dashboards here. So here's all the revenue from all the sources, the expenses from all the sources. This is for 2020. And then particularly, we talked about this earlier, operating fund. So operating fund revenue and operating fund expenses are here. Just some quick dashboards for someone to look at. But if you really want to dive deep into the portal, it really has some cool filters. And this is really take a few hours and play with it. You can filter all the way down to the campus, which makes this fascinating, right? So let's say the funds we want to look at are just operating, because as you can see, we talked about this earlier, there's tons of different budgets, right? So there's a capital budget, parking budget, PACE, professional and continuing education budget, student housing. We're going to focus on operating budget, because that's kind of what we've been talking about this whole time. And we're going to focus on Northridge, just because it's where I'm from and I know. So here you'll see, a quick review of revenues for Northridge. So we have tuition, state appropriations, and other. So you can see that tuition and state appropriations is just a huge percentage of our operating budget. Then instead of revenue, let's break down by I think we had to click up here. We're going to click up here and break it down by expenditure. So this is the money that's coming in. But let's say we wanted to see how the area did annual expenses, right? So we'll click here on CSU operating fund annual expenses, and we'll do the same thing. We'll filter down. We'll look at the campus of Northridge. And we'll look at funds operating only. So here you can see that this is Northridge's overall pie chart of expenses. And like many universities, many CSUs, you will see this significant amount going to salaries and wages, 49.9%, and benefits, 25.25%. And then you'll also see that student financial aid net. So you'll see that, 75, 87% is wrapped up here. So when we're talking about budgets in general and modeling in general, this salaries, wages, benefits, student financial aid is pretty set. So when we're talking about like modeling budgets and doing all these really great things, we're really talking about this small percentage here. Because this big pie, this big part of the pie is already committed for the most part. So this is a great tool. So I encourage you to play around, look at it, find your campus, and see really how things have changed over the years. And so this is just a great tool that the CSU provides, really for the focus of transparency. So campuses have moved this direction too. And it gets, the CSU provides an overview of a campus, but a campus dashboards can get really deep. So we're going to look at CSUN's Questica dashboard. So here it is, the data visualization for CSUN. We're going to scroll down a little bit to find budget. So this is 2021 University General Fund operating budget. So you click on it and it quickly shows you a breakdown of expenditures. We talked about this earlier, right? 70% of the University General Fund is salaries, and this is a planned budget. So this is what the areas have entered as budget coming out and really being a visualization for everybody. So everybody on the campus has the opportunity to know what the plan is. What are we planning to spend for 2021? Now, doesn't always happen that way. I would say this year is completely different. We did so little O&E spending, travel, professional development, all of that did not happen this year. So when we look at the budget, that was a plan, and then we look at actuals later, you'll see some huge variances. So let's say we want to look at really a college area. So we're going to click on Explore By, and then here's the different divisions broken down. As you can see, our largest division is Central University, but that's really where the benefits are. So you kind of click through and you'll see this is where benefits are held. So our largest one line expenditure is benefits. So I will go back and onto college and department area, and I'll click on Academic Affairs Division. That's where I am. And we'll look at College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. So you'll see here, the plan here is that 100% of their budget is salaries and benefits. Now, this is their recurring budget. So this is the base permanent. So they could have expectations of a different additional dollars coming in for those O&E expenses. But we can also look at a different college and at CSUN, all of these areas enter their own budgets. So really it's how they think they're going to be spending. So we look at science and math. They're expecting to spend about 97% of their budget on salaries and then 3% on O&E. And you can see the different areas of O&E. So this is really a goal, once again, from the transparency perspective, that we're providing, showing the campus what our plan is. And really these are public, so we're showing everybody what the plan is for the university, what the budget plan is. So my understanding is some other campuses have this, Humboldt, Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, Bakersfield. It's all in a system called Questica. And so it seems that we're all really working towards being transparent about not only our budget, but in the end, our finances as well. Because as you can see from our portal, there's many different data visualizations that include our year-end reserve balances, the cash invested, the university general operating fund expenditures, as well as our 1920 financial activity. So I promised a few slides ago we were almost done, and that's really where we are right now, is really talking about what are your key takeaways from this presentation. So I know we processed a ton of information. I'm hoping it was not too overwhelming and that you all hung on and stayed with me. But there are some really big things I'm hoping you take away from this conversation. So number one, what is a budget? A budget is a plan. So if the one thing you take away is that, you're much further than other people. So it's really how an institution plans to spend its resources during a period of time. I hope that this has inspired you to go back to your campus and say, hey, what are the budget models that we're using? How is my area allocated? Also, what budget types are funding my area? Do I receive reoccurring dollars? Do I receive one-time dollars? What can I use the recurring dollars for? What can I use the one-time dollars for? I mean, really starting to have a good conversation on your campus about what dollars there are and how are they being allocated. Those are great questions to bring back. And then I think maybe not most importantly, but understanding where you can find budget information. So we showed you the CSU, where you can find it, what you can find. And then I showed you my campus. I showed you CSUN and what they've really done to expand transparency about their budget. So I think that's another great question. Where can you find the budget information? Where can you find who the decision maker is? Where can you find who's discussing it? What areas are discussing it? There's a lot of good questions that I'm hoping you got out of this presentation. And then for further reading, so I'm a reader. I love reading. I think it's really important. So first, the How University Budget Works by Dean Smith is a great, small, really concise book about how universities work. It'd be a great resource for you to have. You can find out on Amazon. It's great. Now, if you're into a little bit technical understanding of budgeting, the College and University Budgeting by Larry Goldstein is really the Bible for college and university budgeting. It's extremely technical. So if you're not ready for that, I would start with How Universities Work. The Goldstein book can be found at nakubo.org. It's a great, really, it gets really into the weeds. So be ready for that. So I really want to thank all of you for participating today and watching our presentation. I hope you were able to take something away from it. And yeah, so thank you so much. And, hope you enjoy the rest of your conference.